at about a $17 million annual budget. So a lot of work that goes on to support that. And they do a really good job of that. This is a picture of one of the aisles in our electric storeroom. Our other, at our Hoskins Center, our other storeroom supports Jamie and his crews at our Fleming Center and the increased work that they're doing as well. And one of the areas that we found through this quality initiative that we wanted to focus in on improving was how we support our capital projects. And in particular, planning that work with our engineering staff and then working on the timing and the distribution of those materials with construction. Really in short, the simplest way to kind of talk through the improvement in this area is that storeroom staff took a much more proactive role in getting upstream of the work and trying to better anticipate the needs that the organization is going to have, better understand the projects that engineering is planning, and better understanding the needs that construction has on how we time and distribute those materials. Engineering has always done a good job of planning those in advance. What we try to do is partner with them more in that proactive role, using some additional tools to be able to query some of their project planning and be able to get down to that item level to understand what needs we can anticipate out in the future and what the results would that be in terms of how we need to adjust for order times and things of that nature. We work with construction very heavily, as well as engineering, to look at our stock, what we have on hand, those minimum levels, when we need to reorder, and how we're going to do that, and fine-tune our information systems to be able to handle that for us. We also spent quite a bit of time looking at how we distribute those materials, and I'll talk just about that in a second. What we found is that this group did, I think, a remarkable job of partnering with these areas to help support some of this work that's going on and staying ahead of that. And just a few examples of some of the results. We've talked a lot about underground construction taking on more of that capital work. And so we really fine-tuned that water main stock analysis, looked at it top to bottom, and adjusted all the inventory amounts. But we also reallocated some staffing as well to help support that operation and distribution of those materials so that we can stay ahead of those crew needs. We also, most recently, relocated some of our electric pad mount transformers. Many of those were inside our electric storeroom, and with that we're able to move that outside, which opened up some of the traffic flow, improved the distribution of those transformers, and also opened up some space inside of our storeroom for some of the more temperature sensitive substation equipment that we're ordering as part of our Century 2 substation rehabilitation projects. There's still a lot of work that's to be done. In fact, we're working to make sure that we support underground construction moving forward as they take on more of the gas new service installations and make sure they have the materials they need. And that's one specific example. At a high level, we're trying to make sure that we stay ahead of and keep that quality focus, be more proactive, and to work smart and leverage technology so that we can continue to stay ahead of those complex inventory needs that KUB has in the future.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Doug Miller, and I'm the manager of our overhead construction department. One of the OHC improvement initiatives that we took on was improving grounding for the protection of our line workers. Now, we've been grounding for many, many years, but we recognized that there were some areas for improvement, and we also recognized that our system has changed, and also the dynamics of our customers have changed some. So when we apply grounds to a de-energized line, what we're doing there is, in a sense, creating a zone of protection for our line worker. So that if the line were to become accidentally energized, the line worker would be protected. If you take a look at the diagram here on the slide, it represents the major components of a properly grounded line. Notice the temporary grounding jumpers that connect each phase of the conductors together and then down to the system neutral. So if a line becomes energized and the grounding is set up proper like it is in the diagram here, there will be an immediate trip and the system will basically short circuit, therein protecting the line worker should that happen. So in a perfect scenario, a de-energized line would never become energized when a crew is working on it. However, customer-owned generators and solar cogens that are installed improperly can create an unexpected and a very dangerous backfeed back out onto the lines. There are other sources too, such as a switch or remotely controlled equipment that could be inadvertently closed when a crew is working on the line. and lightning simply is another source. With proper grounding techniques, we can protect our line workers should any of those scenarios occur. So by the end of July 2016, the original objectives of this program were met, and the team, which included line workers, engineering, and safety, developed standards, new standards for grounding for when, where, and how to apply grounds based on industry standard and also OSHA guidelines. After much discussion with our engineering group and many other utilities, we decided on the right type and size of ground and also the ground clamp, which is very important. Those were purchased and then distributed to the crews over a period of months. Training occurred. OHC and safety trained all of our stakeholders, including our own line workers, vegetation management crews, our damage assessors, and also our system operations group. You know, we continue to improve our grounding program. For example, grounds are very heavy, and they must be applied with a hot line tool or a hot stick, as some may know it. So recently we've been working with OCHELP and our safety group to make sure that our line workers maintain correct body positioning whenever they're installing or removing the grounds so that we can prevent shoulder and back strains. Also, we now use 2 different color grounds to represent the 2 different size grounds that we have. So the foreman can look up when the grounds are in the air and know that his crew is using the right size ground for the voltage application. So in closing, we have absolute confidence that our grounding program is solid now, and we feel like that it provides the highest level of protection for our line
This is electricity 101, but I had that a long, long time in 9th grade. So you're trying to, are you trying to flip a switch so that the electricity that comes through the line inadvertently or unintentionally actually gets stopped, or are you just trying to run it around where the worker is?
We're trying to stop it and de-energize. So the switch in your case is, as your example, is really a relay or another overcurrent device.
And every crew has a foreman, and is that person ultimately in charge of safety, or is everyone given the ability to, if they see something that may be unsafe or something that may be a concern, able to stop and really reassess before moving forward?
Yes, sir. We encourage that. So anyone on that crew, if they see anything or the job changes to the point where they feel like they need to raise their hand, then the crew will come back down and have another job safety briefing before they continue. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Ed Medford. I'm the Manager of Economic Development and Government Relations, and I'm here today to talk about enacted legislation. Oftentimes, for the board, you'll hear proposed legislation, but today's focus is actually going to be on legislation that actually gets passed into state statutes and law. And it's critical for KUB to comply with all state laws that are passed by our state legislators. And we have a complex number of bills, and the impact it has on KUB sometimes spans multiple departments. The numbers you see up on the screen represents last year's legislative session. There are a little over 1,500 bills passed. 128 of those actually directly impacted KUB in some form or fashion, and about 47 of those bills actually passed. And of those, 4 of them were actually deemed significantly impacting KUB. Well, you see those numbers and you say, what all is impacting KUB from this aspect of passing that many? Typically, the vast majority of the bills that are submitted or run through the legislators and actually get passed deal with employee issues. And this is, every company in the state of Tennessee, regardless of the type of job they're doing, are impacted by worker comp changes, healthcare changes, and just worker-related type issues. So that's the vast majority of bills. Occasionally there are some specifics to utilities. For example, last year a law passed that essentially created a no-fly zone around utility infrastructure, such as substations, water tanks, for drones. Drones have been new into the environment, so the state legislators passed a law prohibited flying of drones right inside of substations or over top of them and things of that nature. So it's a safety thing that we needed to implement into our procedures and policies and things of that nature. So this last year's legislative session is very typical of, the numbers are very typical of the past and of the present legislative session. So we actually track all those bills and manage those. As I said, this crosses oftentimes many different departments. And so what we have done is make sure that we assign a single subject matter expert to oversee particular legislation, regardless of how many departments it actually crosses it. And then that person actually owns that particular piece of legislation. Although we track it from the time of its introduction to its eventual passage, that person manages the communication and then develops a communication or implementation and communication plan to make sure that we're implementing that properly and complying with all state statutes, laws, and things of that nature. And that's the source of this quality assurance change that we did, was that we're actually tracking the legislation not only from the introduction but all the way to the implementation. And today, you got to participate, whether you realized it or not, into this quality initiative by the passage of the resolutions you did at the onset of the meeting that was presented by ELPA. Resolution 1358 was done as part of a state statute legislation that was introduced and passed last year. So thank you for assisting with our process. And as we implement that particular policy, communicate it out, put it on the website, once that's completed, we'll actually go into our tracking database and identify the specific policy, procedure, or practice that was changed and identify that as implemented now. So we are tracking the process all the way through, so as legislation is introduced, we can assure and take every step we can to make sure that we are actually complying with the intent of the laws passed by the legislature. So that's the particular quality change that we've implemented. Thank you. Eddie?
Commissioners, I'll be batting cleanup on the last one here. Information services is one of my areas of responsibility at Pittsburgh. Mark Kenner, used to think I'd be able to, Mark Kenner was not able to be here today, so I'll be taking this one. This was software patch management, and as you all know, a patch is just a bit of code supplied to the user by the software company to temporarily fix some kind of deficiency in the software. Happens all the time. And so there's two elements to it. One, it increases the performance of the software once the patch is applied, but most importantly to us, it helps ensure cybersecurity. I've talked to some of you in the Audit and Finance Committee in the past about the defense in depth approach that we utilize for cybersecurity. Patching is a key element of that, in that it helps us with bug fixes. Bugs are just inherent in software, and so these patches take care of the bugs. The reason that bugs are dangerous is that it creates vulnerabilities in the software that can serve as launch sites for certain exploits that allow your software to be penetrated. And while we have all these other things in place, we want to make sure that we're as safe as we can possibly be with our data and with our customers' data as well. To that end, we have a third party come in annually and evaluate our cybersecurity and identify anything that needs to be improved. Our software patch management is considered to be best practice, but we wanted to take it to the next level and do some improvements on that as well. We had been patching them on a quarterly basis. That's a best practice. We want to take it to a monthly basis for certain things, rotate different types of patching that we do, and in the interest of protecting our cybersecurity program, I don't want to go into a lot of detail about how we do that, but that is something that we've implemented. There's a new tool for deployment. Instead of manually doing it, we're automatically doing it. Also, we're verifying the completeness of the patches by a bit of software. We're managing exceptions by system, and what that means is certain systems require third-party software to be patched differently. And we're talking about the Adobes, the Javas, things like that need to be patched a little bit differently, and we're doing that. And then finally, we're creating a metric to monitor on a real-time basis how complete the patches are for a certain system. So those things are underway as well. That just kind of gives you an idea of the kinds of projects we've been working on, the comprehensive nature of them. When we had the update in September, we had about half of the things that were underway and approaching completion. Now, these are the other about half that are still underway right now, and didn't want to expect you to read all of these, but just to give you some idea of the things that we're continuing to work on. And the one natural question would maybe, when you get through with all these, are you through with the quality initiative? And the quick answer is no, because as the business environment changes, it'll create more opportunities for us to improve and to continue to do the basics better in every aspect of the things we do here at KUB. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any comments from folks about the interaction between our tree cutting subcontractors and customers? I keep hearing the same sort of feedback from people that their interactions with these subcontractors are spotty at times, or inconsistent. And did that ever come up with our list?
I'm not sure if there's a particular thing on this other than the general category of communications and collaborations. I do know that we have a customer advocate that works with the customers on these issues and makes sure that there is a direct voice from the customer to the areas at KUB that most impact this. So that was one of the results of our tree panel a few years ago and that we've implemented.
Yeah, because the sense you get is that KUB's folks are incredibly trained and knowledgeable, but we've got these subcontractors that are out there that are interfacing with our customers that may not be trained to that level, but announce themselves as KUB, or I'm here for KUB, and so now they're part of our world.
And I know that the procurement area is working on qualifications of all the vendors at KU. There's a program to evaluate that and make sure they meet not only the proficiency standards, but also the safety standards as well. And so that they're well qualified to be working on our lines and amongst our customers.
And let me just add to that. We believe it's KUB's responsibility to communicate with customers and not our contractors. So, number one, when contractors come under our system in the tree program, we have an orientation and a training that's done, and it separates what you do and what we do. We have foresters then that go out and pre-plan the cycles and do the communication, and they will contact them in writing and say, we're going to do this. And generally, that works because the customer will engage with us. Sometimes there's a rub when the customer doesn't engage with us, and then when the contract crew comes up, they want to engage with them. And that's really not the contract crew's job. They're given instructions that if you get resistance, stop, leave, go away, and we'll come back behind. So we try to train on that. We try to let them understand that's our job, not the contractors, but sometimes it doesn't get executed as well as it should. So it's something we work on.
Thank you.
Commissioners, we have a bit of good news. It's a financial good news, so of course Mark wants to be the one to share that. You authorized us to sell bonds to refinance some debt. We did that last week and we had some excellent results.
Commissioners, as Ms. Roach just stated, a couple of months ago I stood before you and we requested authorization to sell bonds for the purpose of refinancing about $50 million in outstanding debt that was sold back in 2005. In order to achieve some debt service cost savings for our customers. We did sell the bonds last week on March 8th, and the results were very good. In fact, better than what we expected, so I did want to share that with you today. In total, we issued bonds to refinance $54 million in outstanding debt that was sold back in 2005. The bonds were sold, as typically is the case, through a public competitive sale. And we received a significant amount of interest in the bonds. In fact, we received the largest number of bids that we've ever received for electric, gas, and wastewater in all my years of doing this, which is about 20 years. So we actually received 12 bids for our electric bonds, 12 for gas, and 11 for wastewater, which is more than usual. You might say, why is that? Why did you get more this time? And I think because shorter term maturities, the bonds that are being refunded only go out 10 years. So I think that was a big part of it, and also the bonds, we did not put a callable provision in these bonds given the relatively short maturity of what's being refinanced. So I think that helped spark some additional interest. And all of that resulted in getting attractive rates on all 4 sets of bonds, ranging from a low of 1.93% for our wastewater bonds to a high of 2.15% for the electric bonds. And all that translated into $6.4 million in savings for KUB's customers over the next 10 years, with each system sharing in that. Electric getting about half of it at $3.2 million because it had the largest amount of debt being refinanced. So very pleased with that. When I stood before you in January, I projected $4.5 million in savings. So we did about $2 million better than what I had projected at that time. Sometimes it's good to be wrong. Also wanted to mention to you that the high-quality bond ratings that all of our systems have through Moody's and Standard & Poor's were all affirmed as part of this issuance process, nor did they alter the outlook of any of our bonds. That all stayed a stable and positive outlook for by each rating agency as well. And Commissioners, the next series of charts, I'm going to go through fairly quickly. This is information we're required to show you, but basically it's a listing of all the bids that we received for each of the 4 series of bonds, the maturity schedule of the new refunding bonds, and then just a listing of the savings by system. So I'll touch upon these fairly quickly. For electric, again, we received a total of 12 bids. The low-cost bid was Hutchinson Shockey Early & Company, investment banking firm out of Chicago, 2.15% true interest cost on the bonds. So the bonds were awarded to them. You can see the spread between the low and the high, about 28 basis points. For the electric bonds, basically the debt service that's going away with the refinancing is $32.6 million, being replaced with 29.5, so $3,153,000 in debt service savings over the 10-year period for our electric customers. These bonds will fully mature in July of 2027. I mentioned that there's no callable provision, so these will play out. And the weighted average life of the debt, about 6 years. For gas, also 12 bids. The low-cost bid was essentially 2.1% from Bank of America Merrill Lynch. For the gas system, savings of $1,171,000 or $1.2 million over 10 years. These bonds will fully mature in March of 2027. Water, we received 9 bids for these. The low cost is 2.12%, and the low cost bidder was FTN Financial Capital Markets. And for water, savings is lower than the other systems because we were only refinancing about $5.5 million in water system debt. So $651,000 over 10 years. These bonds will also fully mature in March of 2027. And wastewater, 11 bids. FTN Financial Capital Markets also was the low-cost bidder here at 1.93%. These bids were lower than the other systems because there's a smaller or a shorter weighted average life for the wastewater bonds. There's more principal in the first 5 years than the other systems. So an overall average maturity of less than 5 years, so you're going to get a lower rate. And then for wastewater, $1,430,000 over 10 years. And you can see the weighted average life. You can see the principal there, less than 5, which led to the lower rates in the other bonds. And then in closing, just to let you know the professional fees that we incurred as a result of the sale of these bonds. You can see it listed by the firms that we use, and there's